I wrote flour, 0 sacks in the ledger, and felt the cold already testing our walls. If the snow sealed the ground before I found food, the boys' cough would follow winter inside. Their doors closed to us, and the empty sack above my shelf stayed knotted and still. So I carried him toward the piñon pines, counting the days the storm would allow. The wind was quiet that morning, but I knew it would not stay that way. September 1868. Foothills of the Wasatch Range, Utah Territory, above a creek bend folks called Mill Creek Bench. Dawn air was already sharp, and evenings carried a bite that belonged to later months. Our cabin sat on stony ground, with a lean-to of poles and sod pressed to the west wall for wind. A root cellar was dug into the north bank, low and steady cool, even when the sun still tried. I was Sarah, 57 years old. I kept my grandson Levi, 8, fed, warm, and steady. We had 12 days of cornmeal if I stretched it, and 3 sticks of dry cottonwood by the stove. If the first deep snow sealed the ground before we found real food, Levi would go hungry until spring, and hunger can take a child without a sound. I wrote it plain in our ration ledger with a pencil nub. Flour, 0 sacks. Beans, 3 cups. Cornmeal, 12 days, thin. The last tagged flour sack hung limp above the shelf, its string tie still knotted like it could fool me. Levi watched my hand move, quiet, like he could hear the scratching, as loud as the stove's weak draft. The wheat patch we tended all summer failed thin and pale. When we threshed, the chaff seemed heavier than the good. That was the kind of year it had been. His mother had gone east the spring before. Folks called it a quarrel or a wandering. I called it a leaving. His father had been gone longer, taken by a fever that moved fast and left a child's small boots lined up by my hearth. There was no grand story in it. There was only a boy and the work. The first frost came early, white on the grass at first light. I found it inside, too, a faint line of crystals along the lower chinking where the mud had pulled back. It meant the cold was already testing the cabin. Levi held the lamp steady, the flame trembling in the draft. Pride does not fill a pot, so I went to kin. They lived down valley, cousins and an uncle by marriage, people who had eaten at my table when it suited them. At the first place, a woman met me at the door and did not invite us in. She said they were low too, mine eyes sliding past Levi like he was a bill. At the second place, the uncle leaned on his fence and offered advice instead of food. He said I ought to move in with family, as if family were a room you could rent. He did not say hungry. He did not say child. On the walk home, Levi asked why folks got mean when weather turned. I told him fear makes a person small, and small people grab what's in reach. I did not tell him that family can be smaller than strangers. That evening, the stove smoked as soon as I lit it. The draft was wrong. I took the pipe down and found a crack at the elbow, a thin split that leaked soot and heat. I wrote a stove repair note on a scrap and pinned it to the mantel. September 14th. Pipe cracked. Patch before snow. We mixed clay with chopped grass and a little ash. I pressed it deep and wrapped it with wire from an old crate and kept the fire low. After midnight, the wind came down off the foothills and pushed at the lean-to like a hand on a door. Levi's cough started, small and dry, the kind that wakes a grandmother more than it wakes a boy. A cough in September can be a cough in January, and January does not forgive. By morning, I made a choice, not a prayer. There were piñon pines up on the benches, scattered where soil was thin and the sun was honest. I had gathered their nuts as a girl. Old women remember things like that. The land keeps a pantry if you know where to look and if you are willing to pay with your back. Before we left, I checked what little we had. I shook the salt jar until it sounded hollow. I took the last strip of dried rabbit from the hook and split it into 2 equal pieces. In the ledger, I wrote, September 15th, meat 0 after today. Levi took the pencil and made his small L beside the line like a promise. We left before dawn. The sky was gray and the stars had not fully decided to go away. The path up was steep and loose with gravel. Levi's legs worked hard to keep pace. I did not rush him. A tired boy makes mistakes, and mistakes in cold weather cost more than sweat. By first light, we were among the piñons, their trunks twisted low, needles thick and quiet. Cones clustered like tight fists. The ground held old husks and needle litter, dry as paper. I picked a cone and pressed it. Not open yet. I told Levi we had to gather before squirrels took them and before snow sealed them under. We would roast them at home, then knock the nuts free. We worked with our hands until my back spoke up. A medium thought came, clear as the wind. We needed a better way, or we would lose the window. I found a long pole, stripped the side branches, and showed Levi how to knock cones loose with steady taps. Not wild swings. Cones dropped into the litter, and his face brightened like the sound had made room in his chest. By midday, we filled the first basket. The weight pulled at the handle. I tied cord across the top and carved a mark on the rim with my knife. 1. Proof matters when you're tired. A mark keeps a mind from lying. We carried the load down in 2 trips. On the last slope, my boot slipped and my ankle turned. Not a break, but a burn that made my stomach tighten. Levi reached for my arm. I let him help and did not pretend it was nothing. That evening, we spread cones on a sheet of old tin near the coals. Not into flame. Too much heat scorches the nuts. Too little leaves them locked. The cones opened 1 scale at a time, slow as dawn. The smell was resin and smoke. Levi watched like he was guarding a door. I set a sack under the tin and struck the roasted cones with a short stick. Nuts dropped hard as pebbles. Levi rolled one in his palm, then asked if we could eat them right then. I told him yes, but not all. A hungry week is not solved by 1 good hour. In the ledger I wrote, September 15th, Piñon nuts, 3 cups shelled. It looked small on the page. It did not look like winter, but it was the first inch of a long road. We went up again, then again. Some days we carried 2 baskets, some days only 1 because my ankle complained. Levi made a drag sled from 2 long poles and a crosspiece, pulling sacks downhill over needle litter. Crude. Effective. He grinned the first time it saved his shoulders. Every evening we roasted. Every evening we shelled. Our hands grew sore, but our pile grew real. On September 19th, I traded a small bag of nuts at the store for lamp oil. The keeper smirked and asked if I was feeding a squirrel. He wrote a trade chit and tore it free. September 19th, 4 pounds piñon nuts for 1 pint lamp oil. I folded it and tucked it into the ledger where I could feel it with my thumb. A neighbor man met us on the path one day and said pine cones would not keep us. He meant well, which is a way of being cruel without meaning to. Levi's shoulders tightened. I told the man pine nuts kept people alive longer than pride, and we would see. On September 24th, clouds rolled in thick. The air turned still, and stillness makes a woman listen harder. By midday, the first flakes came. Soft as ash, they melted on our sleeves, but they meant the world was changing its mind. I looked at our baskets, rim marks in a row. 1 through 7. 7 baskets gathered, not all shelled, but secured. A number you could hold. We hurried down. Levi fell once when the sled skidded on damp needles. He stood with muddy knees and bright eyes, waiting for scolding. I checked his palms for blood and told him falling is part of learning, as long as you stand again. That night, the temperature dropped fast. The stove worked hard, and my fuel stack shrank. I counted the cottonwood sticks and wrote, "Fuel, 2 sticks left. Food without warmth is still danger." That was when I chose our unusual shelter. Not a miracle, a method. We would live in the root cellar for the first deep spell. The cellar door was low. Inside, it smelled of earth and old potatoes from years before. The temperature stayed even, and the wind could not reach it. I had always used it for storage. Now it would be shelter. Levi said it was dark. I told him dark is not the same as dangerous, and cold is often more dangerous than dark. We carried bedding down, a tick mattress, and quilts. I set the oil lamp on a shelf and trimmed the wick short to save fuel. I wrote, September 29th, moved bedding to cellar for cold spell. Then I made a charcoal mark on the cabin door frame above. Frost line, September. A measured mark turns fear into a thing you can answer. The storekeeper tried pressure as weather tightened. He sent word that last year's flour debt should be settled before roads close. He said it like a kindness. I heard the threat. I went in with Levi at midday, ankle sore, a shawl pulled tight. The keeper talked about paper and dew. He hinted that a cabin can be taken as payment, as if a home is a sack of beans. I did not raise my voice. I set my ledger down and slid the trade chit out. Then I slid another note beside it, neat as I could make it. Labor credit agreed. 3 days mending sacks, 1 day scrubbing storehouse. He said it was not official. I said we could bring it to the meeting house and let folks decide if a man can erase a woman's labor with a shrug. He did not like noise becoming possible. His face changed. He eased off, not kinder, only careful. On October 1st, my old willow weaving shuttle finally split wide. It had been worn smooth from frantic work and now snagged the rim when I tried to mend a basket. I held it and felt how close we were to losing a tool we depended on. I carved a new shuttle from cottonwood with my knife and filed it rough smooth. In the ledger, October 1st, new willow shuttle made. Proof is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is just a tool that keeps a basket from failing. By 3:40 on October the 3rd, snow hit the cellar door like handfuls of dry corn thrown in anger. Levi's eyes opened wide in the lamplight. He asked if it was the big one. I listened to the wind's steady teeth and told him it might be. We stayed below. I roasted cones in the tin pan, right there, lamplight flickering, the smell of resin mixing with earth. Levi shelled nuts steady as prayer, not needing words. The storm pinned us, and the world narrowed to the cellar, the wind, and our choices. That was hunger's first real try. A blizzard makes a person learn the cost of waste. I cooked a handful of nuts into thin mush with a pinch of salt. Levi ate slow. He asked if we had enough to reach April. I did not promise. I counted. I showed him the baskets stacked along the wall, rim marks facing out like numbers on a shelf. I told him we had made a store the storm could not steal, unless we let it. When the wind eased, we opened the door, and the world was white and rearranged. Snow lay up to Levi's knees in places. The cabin above was half buried. I took the shovel and cut a path. My ankle wobbled on packed snow, pain flashing hot against the cold. I leaned on the handle, breathed, and worked slow. Slow kept us upright. We used the cabin only in daylight for tasks and kept sleeping below. Folks would have talked if they knew. Let them. Talking does not change temperature. In early December, the road stayed hard with ice, and folks moved like they were older than their years. Levi and I walked to town only when we had to, keeping our steps small and sure. The cold made every errand feel like a gamble. One afternoon, a cousin rode up, scarf pulled high, eyes sharp. He said he had heard talk about my cellar. He asked if I was hiding something. Then he laughed, like it was a joke that could still sting. He said their family had been stretched, and maybe I could spare a little, since I had found a trick. I told him it was not a trick. It was a season and a method. He looked at Levi, then back at me, and his mouth tightened. He asked again, softer, as if softness could buy what refusal could not. I did not slam the door. I did not preach. I took out the ledger and opened it to the ration lines. I showed him the cups we used each day, the marks, the math. I showed him the snow note and the cough note. I let paper speak because paper does not tremble. Then I told him, plain, that a child's winter is not a place for charity. If he wanted trade, we could trade. He had brought a sack of cracked wheat in his saddlebag. Not a gift. Something he could part with if it meant he did not go home empty. We weighed it on my small scale. I traded a measured bag of nuts, no more than I could replace in careful rationing. I wrote a note and made him sign. December 6th, traded 6 pounds Piñon nuts for 12 pounds cracked wheat. His name was messy on the line, but it was there. He left without laughing again. That night, I cooked the cracked wheat thick, and Levi's eyes went wide at the weight of it in the spoon. He ate slow, like he was afraid it would disappear if he moved too fast. I told him food tastes better when it is measured, because measured food lasts. A week later, the weather turned mean again. By first light, the creek bank was glass, and a hard wind rattled the lean-to. Snow drifted against the cabin door above, piling where the west wall met the ground. I took my knife and cut a second mark on the doorframe, higher than the first. December 14th, drift to this line. If we survived, those marks would teach us where wind liked to build its traps. That same day, the stove draft faltered again. Not a crack this time, a clog. Soot had thickened where the pipe bent, and the smoke wanted our room. I scraped it out with a wire and a rag, hands black, throat tight. I wrote a short note and tucked it with the first one. December 14th. Pipe cleaned. Keep vents clear. Proof is also a warning to your future self. In the cellar, Levi began to keep his own small record. He asked for a scrap page. He wrote the date the best he could and drew a tiny pine branch beside the cup marks. It was childish and serious at once. I let it be. A boy who counts is a boy who believes tomorrow exists. Near Christmas, a neighbor woman brought wool yarn in trade for nuts. Her children were thin, and her pride fought her mouth. I did not give charity that could kill us. I traded. We wrote it down. December 23rd, traded 3 pounds nuts for wool yarn. Then, by lamplight, I mended Levi's sock heel. I counted stitches to keep my hands steady in the cold. 17 stitches. Sock, heel. Another proof line. Small as a heartbeat. January came like a hard sentence. The cold deepened, and the night air bit even inside the cellar door. The lamp oil ran low again, and the flame shrank to a small, stubborn tongue. One evening after midnight, Levi asked if his mother would come back when snow melted. His voice was soft, like he expected the question to hurt. I told him I did not know. I told him people choose their roads, and we cannot pull them by the sleeve. Then I told him what I could promise, without lying. We would keep this place. We would keep each other. We would keep making tomorrow possible. A second blizzard arrived in late January. Not as loud as the first, but heavier. Snow pressed the cabin roof above, and the world outside went flat and white. Levi and I stayed below, roasting cones and stirring nut mash until the pot smelled toasted and steady. Our breath sounded loud in the small space, and the wind made the doorboard hum. That storm brought a new cost. Moisture crept in, slow, from the door crack, and one basket near the wall felt damp at the bottom. Damp means mold. Mold means sickness. I pulled the nuts out onto cloth, spread them thin, and dried them near the cellar opening whenever the wind eased. It stole time. It stole sleep, but it saved food. I relined the basket with fresh cloth and sewed it tight. The needle was stiff in my fingers, but I kept at it. 52 stitches. Basket 6 relined. Levi held the lamp close and did not complain. He had learned that complaining is a luxury that spends heat. By mid-February, word had spread that we were managing. People love a story when it proves them wrong. The same mouths that had mocked now asked questions. How did you roast them? How did you store them? How did you keep a child from coughing himself into the ground? I answered the questions the way you answer a neighbor in winter, with facts, not pride. I told them to mark their baskets. I told them to keep chits and notes. I told them to measure the snow where it piles. I told them that method looks plain until it saves you. When March softened the drifts and the creek began to sing under thin ice, Levi wanted to see the pines again, not to gather, to remember. We walked up on a clear day at midday, the sun honest but still weak. The pole we had used for knocking cones still leaned where we left it, bark weathered, tip worn. The land does not keep many things for you. Sometimes it keeps a simple pole, as if to say, I saw you try. Levi touched the trunk of a piñon and said he would teach his children someday. He did not say if. He said when. That was the quiet legacy winter gave him. In April, when the first real thaw opened the ground, my relatives came by smiling like nothing had happened. They spoke about planting, about luck, about how hard the season had been. I offered water. I kept my ledger closed. I did not shame them. I did not beg them. I let them see Levi carry a basket with steady hands and a calm face. Let them see that refusal did not end us. It trained us. That evening I opened the ledger one last time and ran my thumb over the folded chits and notes. The paper edges were soft from being handled. They were proof, yes, but they were also lessons. Write it down, measure it, repair it, trade fair. Keep a child warm before you chase pride. I set the ledger back on the shelf beside the empty flour sack, still knotted, still useless, and I felt something steadier than anger. I felt prepared. If you want more calm frontier survival stories like this, please like and subscribe.